we're moving right along. We're going to take you into the next chapter. We're going to have a good time. Introduce some new things that are going to be, of course, new to Lizzy, and tell you a little bit more about this world that she's in. And I think you're going to enjoy some of the imagery and some of the mystery.
I do, and I think the kids are going to like this chapter a lot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff.
Let's take a listen. We'll be right back.
See ya.
Chapter 16. They topped a gentle rise, and the road stretched out in front of them, drifting slowly down until it disappeared into a sprawling thicket of trees. "That's Valendale Forest, just there, up ahead," said Gretta. Lizzy looked at the road as it needled its way through the meadows and disappeared into a thick forest. "Let's stop for a moment. We can rest our legs and have a trifle, shall we?" suggested Gretta. "Aye, I could use a wee bit of food in me tummy," added McDoogle. Lizzy admitted that she was hungry as well, so Gretta led them off the road to a spot by the lake that was out of sight, hidden under the shade of several very large bumbleberry trees. They each took a bag from the inside pockets of their cloaks and pulled out a trifle. As Lizzy sat quietly eating her lunch, she examined her surroundings more closely. She was fascinated by the various unfamiliar flowers whose heads danced and paddled in the breeze. The lake sparkled with twinkling flashes that reminded Lizzy of the holiday lights at Crown Plaza. It made her wonder if the days were the same here as they were back home. She hadn't noticed any decorations at Fiddler's Cove, but then she remembered Gretta saying something about Midwinter's Eve and that it was their biggest feast day. If that were so, they surely would have decorated. "Do you put up decorations to celebrate Midwinterfest?" asked Lizzy. "We do," replied Gretta. "Did you notice the baskets on the porches and the bundles of twigs above the lintels?" Lizzy nodded. "The twigs and baskets are our most important Midwinterfest tradition." "What are the twigs for?" asked Lizzy. "Aha," said Gretta. "Now that is a question. The bundle of twigs is called a twigsicle. Every child in a lair wants a visit from Mr. Boots. They make wishes and write them on bright, colorful ribbons. Then they tie their wishes to the bundles of twigs to make twigsicles. The twigsicles are then hung above the lintels of their front doors, so that when Mr. Boots comes along on Midwinter's Eve, he can read their wishes and make them come true. Some children these days use huge ribbons that dangle down in front of the door to make sure that Mr. Boots won't miss them." "In a way, Mr. Boots is like our Santa Claus," Lizzy noted. "Is Santa Claus that man in the display that was on the front lawn by the pond?" asked Gretta. "Yes, except we put our wishes in letters and send them to the North Pole, or we sit in Santa's lap and tell him what we want," explained Lizzy. "Does Mr. Boots have a big white beard and wear a red suit?" she asked. Gretta chuckled. "No, he doesn't wear a red suit, but he does have a beard. He has a very long, black beard that comes to his waist and big, black, bushy eyebrows. He's 3 feet tall. He wears a brown coat that goes down to the ground, tall black boots that come up to his knees, and a top hat that reaches to the clouds." "Reaches to the clouds?" puzzled Lizzy. "It's just a saying here everyone uses to describe Mr. Boots' hat. It just means it's a tall hat." "I think I would like him," said Lizzy. She was very interested in what Gretta was telling her, and she wanted to know more. She asked about the baskets. "The baskets are for friendship. They are placed on the porches 8 days before Midwinterfest and are filled with all sorts of fun things. Sometimes they are silly treats, and sometimes they are useful items. During this time, people come and take something from the basket, but they also put something in the basket. The exchanges are always anonymous. It's considered bad luck to look in your own basket before Midwinter's morning. At dawn on Midwinter's Day, the basket is brought inside, and the friendship gifts are shared with everyone in the house." "I think that's a wonderful tradition. Maybe I can get that started at home," said Lizzy, taking another bite from her trifle. It dawned on Lizzy that if the baskets were still on the porches at Fiddler's Cove, then it must not yet be Midwinter's Day. "So what day is it now? I mean, "When is Midwinterfest?" she asked Lizzy. "Today is King's Day. It's 2 days until Saturn's Day, which is Midwinter's Eve. So this year's Midwinter's Day falls on Sunday." Greta went on to explain the days of the week in all air. 8 days in a week? That's so fab. Now I know I'm dreaming. "What are you talking about?" asked Greta. Lizzy told Greta all about the Beatles and how she thought they were the coolest band ever and that 8 days a week was now the #1 hit in the country. She attempted to memorize Allaire's days of the week, but then decided to do that another time. McDougall's keen ears alerted him, and he looked up. "Would that be them up there, fleeing to the city?" Greta and Lizzy looked to the sky. "Yes, Mr. McDoogle. Gertie and Molly are on their way to Anza. They'll still get there on time today, and they'll be ready for us when we arrive tomorrow." "My humblest apologies for me being the cause of our delayed departure," said McDoogle. "Think nothing of it," said Greta. "It didn't take very long for us to make your cloak." Earlier that morning, as they had prepared to leave Fiddler's Cove, Gabby took on the job of drying Lizzie's red cloak. She bundled it up and put it in a shoulder satchel, then filled small sacks full of truffles for them to take on their journey. She laid Lizzie's and Greta's leaf cloaks by the front door. Molly fashioned a primitive hairbrush for Lizzie that she made from tweedle reeds. Lizzie was delighted with it, and she spent most of her time trying to untangle the mop that had formed on top of her head during the overnight flight. While the others were busy about their tasks, Greta and Gertie worked on making a small leaf cloak for McDoogle. As Lizzie brushed her hair, she watched Greta and Gertie masterfully craft the cloak. She also inquired as to why they needed to wear the cloaks. If this was winter, it certainly wasn't cold and uncomfortable. "We need them for protection. There will be times when we may need to hide. The leaf cloaks will camouflage us while we are on the road, especially from above. The cloaks are not our only protection. I have a couple of other options up my wings, should we need them. You are the Princess of Allaire, and I must protect you by whatever means possible." "Aye, and I'll be looking after ye protection too, lass," said McDoogle, reminding Greta of his duties. As they were about to leave, Greta announced that Molly and Gertie would be flying to Anza, that Gabby would be staying at Fiddler's Cove to oversee things there, and that she would be taking them to Vallendale Forest to a place that was called Deep Glen. Lizzie had casually replied, "That sounds like a spooky place, but I bet it will be fun. Will they have flying monkeys?" Greta cocked her head at Lizzie and queried, "Flying monkeys?" Lizzie shook her head and told Greta to never mind, and went on brushing her hair. It was past mid-morning when they finally left Fiddler's Cove and started down the trail. The sun warmed the earth, and the scent of jumping jacks filled the air. Each side of the trail was covered in pumpkin-colored blossoms. Lizzie had never seen jumping jacks before, but then again, she had rarely traveled very far from Overland Park. Once, though, when she was 7, the Albrights had taken a family vacation to Disneyland and drove on Route 66 all the way to California. She didn't remember seeing jumping jacks on Route 66. Soon the trail ended and emptied onto the main foot road that went by the lake, through the forest, and on to Anza. Foot roads were reserved for people traveling on foot, but new laws had been passed that now allowed bibies and tribies on Lake Road. The change had been a great annoyance to Greta. "Now that they've allowed the bibies and tribies, I assure you that it won't be long before fancy motorbees will be scuttling all up and down this road," Greta grumped. "Just be careful and stay alert. There can't be any accidents." 2 travelers on bibies went by. The seats were much higher than Lizzie had imagined, but other than that, she thought they looked like bicycles, only bigger. She decided she wanted one until she saw the tribees with 2 people sitting side by side, which made her want one of those even more. After a while, Lizzie finally asked the question that had been on her mind. She wasn't even sure if she should ask, but she did anyway. "Why aren't we flying?" Greta stopped and looked at Lizzie. "I can't fly you anymore, Princess. Flying you to Allaire was a dangerous risk, but it was the only way to get you here through the tunnel of stars. From now on, neither you nor me nor McDoogle can draw any attention to ourselves." Lizzy was beginning to understand that Gretta was very serious about her safety. Although she didn't feel that she was in any danger, she intended to do what she was asked. There was nothing else to do but wait and see what happens. As far as walking, she didn't mind it, but she was sad to know she wouldn't be flying with Gretta again. The lunch break had been a much appreciated respite for everyone. The early afternoon sun beamed down its warmth. There wasn't a whisper of a breeze. They were enveloped in peace and the perfect sound of silence. McDoogle suddenly raised his ears. He was hearing a soft, distant whirring noise that caught his attention. He finally spotted something up in the sky, far away. "What's that?" McDoogle asked, pointing his nose in the direction of the sound. "Me eyes must be playing tricks." Lizzy and Gretta finally heard the noise too, and both of them scanned the skies looking for whatever it was. They finally saw it. There was some sort of flying machine zipping along, but it was too far away for Lizzy to tell what it really looked like. "Maybe it's a UFO," exclaimed Lizzy. "Last spring, there was one in New Mexico, in Soroc, I can't remember the name of the place, but they said it was real, and we talked about it a lot at school." "What's a UFO?" asked Gretta. "It stands for Unidentified Flying Object. Visitors from outer space, Martians. I would freak out if that was a UFO." "Well, you can calm down because there's nothing unidentified about it. It's a motorbee," said Gretta. "You mentioned motorbees earlier. What's a motorbee?" asked Lizzy. "They are motorized vehicles. You'll see lots of them when we get to Anza. Some people fit them with rotators so they can hover and fly, but they can't fly far. That one won't be up there much longer," explained Gretta. Lizzy looked again, and sure enough, it was already gone. "You mean to tell me that people living here drive cars that fly?" "Well, I guess the answer is yes, but it's not a lot of people, and it's not very often." Lizzy wasn't interested in having a tri-bee anymore. Now she wanted a motorbee and was imagining what it would be like to fly one. "I guess we had better get back on the road," Gretta hinted. "We still have a ways to go." Lizzy stood up and adjusted her satchel. McDoogle shook off the grass. Gretta suggested they fill their water flask here, since it would be a while before they came to fresh water again. They were putting their flasks back in their leaf cloak pockets when Gretta suddenly froze and said, "Shh!" She was listening intently and looking to the sky in the direction of the forest. McDougall's ears perked up as well. "What's that awful ruckus?" inquired McDoogle. A black cloud was swirling above the forest. The undulating mass darkened an entire section of the sky. It was tracking a course high above Lake Road, and it was heading directly toward them. "The grackles!" she shouted in a whisper. "Hide, now, under your cloaks. Hurry, get on the ground." Lizzy saw the swarming mass rushing their way. She and McDoogle both did as they were instructed and dove to the ground, huddled in a ball, and pulled their leaf cloaks tightly around themselves. Off in the distance, they could hear the high-pitched chattering that was coming from thousands of birds. The horrific noise sounded more like the squeaking shrills of tortured souls than birdsong, and it kept getting louder. "Don't move," said Gretta, as quietly as she could. Lizzy wasn't exactly sure why they were having to hide. She had seen flocks of birds before, never this many, but she suspected they were just flying in a group, like many birds do, to get from one place to another. Still, something in the sound of Gretta's voice indicated that the situation was serious, and Lizzy realized she needed to heed the warning. She might not understand why, but deep down she knew that it was best for her to stay out of sight. The mass of birds was directly above them. Not only could Lizzy hear their deafening, piercing shrieks, but she could actually feel her leaf cloak moving from the wind that was generated by their aggressive, flapping wings. It seemed like an eternity, but eventually the noise started to ebb and became a long, slow decrescendo that finally faded away. "Don't move," Gretta whispered again. Greta was listening for any hint of a grackle that might be lingering behind. Mr. McDoogle, do you hear anything? Greta had begun to appreciate McDougall's ears. No, Miss Greta, I dinna hear a thing. Greta poked her head out and scanned the skies. Okay, they're gone. She let out a sigh of relief. Lizzy and McDoogle crawled out from under their cloaks, stood up, and brushed themselves off. What was that? Asked Lizzy. That, my dear princess, was trouble.
So what do you think? What do you want to buy first? Which toy do you want first?
I want the Mr. Boots doll.
He sounds like a fun character, Mr. Boots.
Mr. Boots.
I love him. I love the basket idea on the porches, and you're supposed to sneak a present in and out, and then, you know, on the big day, you bring your basket in and see what is in there. And oh my gosh, I just think that just sounds like a tradition that could really start and be fun.
Honestly, too, because the friendship baskets on the porch, I've shared this with a couple of friends, and they're like, I want to start a friendship basket tradition. And then, of course, the wishes are all in the twigsicle and the ribbons and so forth. So that's where the wishes get to come in. But yeah, the friendship basket, I wouldn't be surprised if we could get a whole new thing started on the holiday season with the friendship baskets.
It could be really fun, I think, yeah.
The bibies and the tribies are kind of like they're manual, right? And the motor bees that have the little rotators, they're the ones up in the sky. I would like to play on one of those as well. But this chapter's bringing in the first little bit of
danger.
Oh, yeah, the grackles.
Scary.
Well, and we're going to be learning more about all of these things and how they come together. And it is interesting that we had these fellas, you know, these Cedric and Gethric and Oris and Ginevra, and they're kind of gone now, aren't they?
Yeah. Wonder what happened to them.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out if you stay with us, everybody. So we'll come back. This was 16. We're going to come back with 17.
Bye.